Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Messaging. I'm Emma Stratton, and today I'm so excited to be joined by my friend, Jordan Greene, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Outreach. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, what's going on, Emma? Super excited to chat and get to spend more time with you.
Yes, it is so great to talk with you. You are such a smart marketer. And one thing I think is so interesting about you is that you were the first senior marketing hire at Outreach, and you're a product marketer.
Right.
How cool is that?
It's amazing. I think it speaks a lot to our founders and what we valued in marketing and what they wanted to spend our first, early cycles doing.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And the way the company has grown proves that you're a thing or two about positioning and messaging, kind of starting a category, growing a category. So I want to know your secrets, right? Tell me, how do you kind of think about messaging at your organization? How do you approach it?
Yeah, I love this question, this topic, because it's the core of what we do in product marketing, but it gets ignored too often. I think the core issue that we often face in product marketing teams, and I face this in my career, is that we think of messaging as a one-off set of deliverables. Our classic workflow in messaging is, okay, we need to produce a new messaging framework for a new product or a company, or we're evaluating that. Let's go through this motion, and we have a workflow that we all do. We research and we get feedback internally, and then we ship something, and it's like, okay, the sales deck's gone. Now we move on. And to me, what I'm obsessed with, what I think really matters, is what's the environment you're creating for yourself or your team to create good messaging. And to me, that environment needs to be customer obsessed. And so what I spend a lot of time doing and what I think about for my team is, what are the inputs? What are the daily, weekly, monthly rituals that we do that allow us to be customer obsessed enough that when we need to do messaging, we already have this amazing foundation. We've already done the work to have built a great gut. And so I think that great marketing teams that do a good job of messaging have this strong customer obsession that's embodied in the daily, the weekly, and the monthly rituals that the team runs.
Yeah, I love that. This idea of building a gut through obsession with the customer, understanding your users. Would you mind sharing some of these rituals that you do with your team, like kind of weekly or monthly? What are some of the things you do to stay obsessed?
Yeah, there are three that we try to do a good job at a monthly and quarterly level. I'm sure lots of other people have great ideas. I think these three have worked well for us.
Yeah.
The first is our team, and that means everybody on the team, from the ICs through the leadership, need to have frequent direct interactions with buyers, customers, and other folks that just like fit within your target persona, but don't fit into your easy ecosystem. And the important thing about, I think, those interactions, besides the fact that they happen, is that you're using them to build empathy and to kind of maintain that audience gut. And so we don't put a lot of structure around what those interactions look like. It's okay if it's a discovery session. It's okay if it's over coffee. It's okay if it's talking shop for 20 minutes after one of our events. Right. The important thing is that happens, and that use it as a time to build up your understanding of what they care about. Probably, I think for this area, the most deliberate thing we make sure we do that happens is commit to a certain number of call downs for won and lost opportunities. So this quarter, we're trying to do 20. We do 10 buyers that chose us and 10 buyers that chose not to buy us.
Nice.
And, we have a structure for how we do it. I think those are really the most formal version of direct interactions that we do, but those are super, super critical. So I think that's the first thing, is those interactions. The second thing is something that technology now allows us to do, and that's passive listening to sales and customer calls at like a pretty big scale. Yeah. Obviously, our software does this, and there are other vendors in the space that do it, but call recording and analytics exist, and it's like the product marketing tool set of the century. You can listen to, I have folks on my team that have listened to 10,000 calls this year. Wow. And this is an important way to scale, to make sure that your group has more inputs from customers than any other team. It means that, like, there's one person on my team who I know has listened to more calls than any sales rep could have been on themselves during a year, right? So wow. It brings a certain level of scale to consuming, understanding what's going on with our buyers. And because it is a little hard, the trick to this is, 1.5 or 2x speed. That's how you get to those. And you do it in the background, and you're not always like actively listening, but that's why I call it passive listening, is just consuming and listening. And then I think the third practice, and this might be counterintuitive, but I actually think it's the most important, is to regularly consolidate learnings and insights as a group from calls, from going and having those conversations, and then sharing it with somebody. Ideally, the somebody you're sharing it with is your key stakeholders and you're developing strong relationships that way. But I think the act of having to force something on paper or in a deck and then show it to somebody else crystallizes your learnings in a way that help embody into your gut the learnings that actually came out from all those conversations.
Wow. I love this. You're actually giving us sort of like this practical guide to building up a gut and building up a muscle and an intuition around messaging. So knowing that you kind of take this organic, ongoing approach and learning, how does that go into your cycles of refreshing messaging or relooking at messaging or your cadence there? Are you constantly iterating? Are you still sort of looking at it every 6 months, for example? Like, does it change the way you kind of maintain your messaging, like in the product marketing department?
In terms of our messaging cadence, throughout the years in our growth cycle, there's no predictable time or milestone basis to do it. Mostly because, especially in high growth, like things change so often.
Yeah.
Your buyer, your customer, the market, your product, hopefully as well. And so I find often that either we start to see some seeping issues in sales velocity or sales, where someone's like, hey, something's not working, or we're observing it and calls itself, or the business has a pretty strong reason. And we or leadership say, hey, the product is materially enough different, or we're doing something new. And so I feel like this kind of spark, now it's time to reevaluate our messaging. And we're actually just in the process of doing that right now. We kind of moved from being a single product to multi-product. It's an obvious time for us. I think that like the customer obsession practices help build this foundation, this gut for your team as you go into that. It makes it easier to develop an initial hypothesis, to listen to internal stakeholders and have those customer convos. But even though those practices exist, I still think you need to make sure that, I like to sandwich these kinds of messaging workflows with qualitative feedback at the beginning and at the end, and use quantitative in the middle. So it's like, at the beginning, you're using qualitative to build your gut. It's really about developing a hypothesis, something you're going to test with your target buyer and internal folks. And then you're using workshops and quantitative measures to like actually test and validate it. Once again, ideally with your target audience, not just internal folks. And then you close out, like you validate that where you landed makes sense by once again returning to qualitative and using personal one-to-one connections with customers to kind of validate where things are at.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. This is a really cool insight you're sharing here. I want to just rewind back because you started, you were the first high level marketer at Outreach, and you had shared a story with me about just like a really cool moment at the first Unleashed conference.
Oh yeah.
Would you mind sharing that story? Because you're kind of talking about a sophisticated team with like all these amazing practices at messaging, but you were there from the very beginning when people didn't even really understand this new way. I mean, Outreach actually came up with a new way of selling. So would you mind just sharing that story? Because it's so good.
Yeah. So, I mean, early on at Outreach, you don't have a big marketing budget. You can't do a lot of things that a scaled or larger business would do to market yourself. And so you got to really focus on building a tribe. And that's, Manny, our CEO, and our team, that's kind of what our early focus was. Like, how do we build a tribe of people that believe the same thing about sales that we believe and can help us not only evangelize our business, but more importantly, evangelize the way we're saying that sales leaders should do their business.
Yep.
And if enough people believe in this way of doing business, our business is going to be okay. It's sort of the long-term view there. And so we kind of believe that an important way of getting these folks to help connect with each other was a customer conference. So really early on in my first year, we had our first customer conference, Unleash. And the first conferences, you're begging people to come. It's your friends and family, you're calling up your best. And so you do that. We had this one particular, I'll say prospect, but it was somebody who had a relationship with somebody in the business, and they had engaged with us on a sales cycle. And, we were trying to get them on board with our way of selling and also using our technology. And I'll say the best version of this person was a skeptic. They were talking to us because they had to. They didn't buy into the technology. They didn't buy into the new methodology. But they were willing to commit to coming to Unleash because of that personal relationship. So we got them there. And just like every good conference, you have a big keynote, you share your story, you're trying to land this pitch, and then you have an after party and you socialize and you have drinks and everyone's having fun. And while I was at the after party, I overheard this skeptic giving our pitch to somebody else. And they were advocating like our new way. And it was clear that she got it. Like she had converted the message, the way we had landed our story had landed with this person who was really critical. And it was one of those moments where you just go, hey, we're onto something here. Like there's a tribe we can build. The product marketing work we're doing, the beliefs, the why that leadership have makes sense. And it felt good. It was fun.
So good. I mean, so good. Such a story from those early days, trying to explain to people what sales engagement is, all the way to $4.4 billion company. I mean, it's an amazing story. So thank you so much for all of these ideas and practical tips you shared, because I think they're really, really great.
Yeah, happy to be here. And this was fun.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Okay, that was so good. And people like not getting it. And now it's like, it's huge. It's so cool.
I do sometimes think that, I'm sure you feel this way too about the work you do. Things are always amazing in hindsight. Like you remember the best and you forget all the turmoil. And it's even like, I'll say this with my customer obsession, like beliefs and methodologies, it's also so hard to keep them up. It's like anything else, you're building muscles. And if you stop going to the gym, you lose those muscles, and it's super easy to not meet our standards. Like, yeah, it's always
got so many other things to do.
That's right. But so, it's easy to make things look good. It's hard to do the real thing.
I know, it just takes damn commitment and consistency. So to just keep, it's not always pretty. Right. Believe me, I know that too. Okay, Jordan. So, you've had an amazing career so far. You've still got a long way to go. If you were to go back, 20 years to your younger self and give yourself some advice about marketing or your career, what would you say?
I think one of the most important pieces of advice that I would tell myself that I kind of wish I had embodied a little bit better early in my career is that great marketing can't be done by a committee.
Yes.
And it's an easy trap to fall into for a lot of reasons. One, we're a very cross-functional, team. You need stakeholder buy-in. You need to work really, diligently with your stakeholders, and then you need to have strong input into the work you do in marketing. But committees and co-creation dilute messaging, they dilute creative, they dilute choices in lead generation programs and channel choice. And so I think as a marketer, you need to do the right things to have a strong point of view, get the right inputs, spend the right time with your customers so that you can have a strong point of view, and then use, your internal stakeholders to give you feedback, to give you the inputs, but make a commitment to how you want to market something and then test and iterate. Use the data to tell you one way or the other. And don't get caught up in the committee mentality that often exists in a lot of businesses.
Yeah, that is awesome advice. I think it's a challenge that so many people face. And it's almost harder to kind of go when you're starting out in your career and you're less experienced, kind of go in hard with a point of view. But this idea of have your point of view, let it be well informed by the data and the research. So it's not just here's what I think and it's right, but here is the truth we're finding, and being strong and not backing down. So really good advice, Jordan. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, happy to.
Awesome.
I'm curious, what got you into deciding you want to do like a podcast and stuff? Is this mostly like, hey, this is my subject matter expertise. Like I want to do some content marketing for like me and my business, or something else?
Yeah. So, I mean, I do the LinkedIn, that's for my own marketing, my business, but also I have like a goal to publish a book on, messaging for technology. That's kind of the one thing. And then, my business has been growing, and Alex, I kind of got to know him, and with Sharebird, their mission is really like kind of producing tons of content around product marketing. So they need to partner with content creators. So he just said, hey, we're going to try a video series. Like we've done podcasts, we haven't done videos. Do you want to do one on messaging? I was like, yeah. Cause it's just, for me, it's a real change of pace, just getting to chat with other people in the industry. Just like making connections and putting more stuff out there, and sort of my face more, not just like my words. So that's really why I'm kind of doing it. And yeah, it's been good. I mean, I know so many product marketers now. I think you were the first one I knew, like the first official product marketer, like that was you. That's where I kind of learned what it was. I was like, what's product marketing?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, you've had some really good ones on the podcast so far.
Yeah, some really, really good ones.
I have a thought and a question for you. The thought is, I really thought when we worked together, like one of the things you were so good at was the copy. And I feel like people underappreciate the importance of copywriting and messaging.
They do.
It's so hard. And There's only one book I've ever even been told to read. And it's somewhere on one of my shelves about
Oh, what is it?
copywriting.
I probably know what it is. What is it? It's Ogilvy on advertising.
Okay, I got to. Yeah. I think Ogilvy on advertising is maybe the obvious, but like I do think, even though this is the problem with like positioning, like the original books and other things, like all about advertising, and marketers
Yes,
don't do that much more anymore. But
right.
advertising is about great copy.
It
So
is.
I think that. And then the other one, I assume you've heard the Boron letters.
No, never
Oh
heard of
man,
that.
this is like, oh, maybe Dave Gerhardt or like Adam
Okay.
Schoenfeld, like somebody was like obsessed with this. This is the copywriting book. And so I read it and I learned a lot. I mean, it's the basics of like writing good copy just in general.
Right.
And it's good. And you can look like this is the most janky. It's not like an officially published book. Like
Interesting.
getting a copy of it, I think was hard. And it's like,
Oh God, it's like Eugene Schwartz's Breakthrough Advertising. That's another
yes,
book I can't get a him. It's like $300. So yeah, it's
this
like a
one's
top secret book.
yeah, I kind of think so. But the reason I was mentioning this is I feel like you're good at it. And I don't think people get enough guidance on it. It's like, if there's a way to weave in your methodology to the book, I feel like you 100% should do that. I would love to read that and like think more about it.
Awesome. That's what I'm trying to do is sort of like weave in copywriting principles, direct, conversion into messaging, into sort of just like soup to nuts, like here's how to do it. And also, I've done some training, right? So I've taught some marketing teams, product marketing teams. I do like a 2-day, it's like 2.5 hours,
Mm.
2.5 hour sessions where I teach people how to do like messaging. We workshop the company's actual kind of messaging, and I give exercises and also feedback and group exercises and things like that. So I'm launching that to individuals like marketers. So it's like, yeah, I've been sort of like teaching, I've been doing more of that because that's where I really want to go, is basically just help more people find simple ways to actually do better at this,
I love
So,
it. I think it's cool.
yeah.
All right, I know we're over. I do have a question for you though. Which of your podcast episodes that you've recorded so far, the ones that are publicly available, which one do you think is like the most brilliant? Which do you think is like the best?
I think the most brilliant ones haven't really aired yet. They're in season 2. So this is season 2. Let me see. Because there are definitely some that were better than others. Okay, I loved talking with JD Prater.
Yeah, I listened to that one. JD was good.
He's just awesome. I like his approach. He's really good. I'm just trying to see who else. Yeah, season 2 is stronger. So Sarah Din is good because she came from SurveyMonkey. So she's just like the queen of research approach and data. So she's really good. Like there's a lot of sort of ideas there. Michael Peach was good. He's smart. He had some really good insights there. Those were my favorite ones from season 1. I would have to say, like the ones that really stood out. I mean, everyone was good and, saying similar things, but season 2, there's a couple really interesting ones. I think this one will probably launch pretty soon. Andrew Stinger, who's at Coda. And because he came from YouTube and like Google, and the whole team from YouTube came to Coda. So he had stories, just really awesome stories about testing messaging, just like product naming that flopped and why. And Coda tells a really good story. So, and I loved him. Also, he was just really kind of eccentric, and he had his dog on his lap who had a lampshade on his head. He was really good. So some of the season 2, I'm kind of more into because I get them to share more stories about what they actually did at their company, which I think people find easier to kind of latch onto.
Yeah, I get that.
So I think yours is really good too. Really good, because also I like it when people talk about things that no one else has really talked about. It's hard. Everyone's like, oh, it has to be simple. It has to be clear. You have to listen to your customers, which is true. But to kind of get something more nuanced, or like, here's like JD's was so good because he's like, here's where we fucked up. And like, I wish I had, it's like sharing the truth and normalizing the fact that you're not going to get it right always. And that's fine. You just,
Well, even if you get it right, it decays.
Yes.
So to me, that's why you have this question, which is like, okay, if you're in any job and you have to build something that decays, that has a lifetime value, what do you do to counteract that? You build a set of systems that allow you to constantly rebuild that thing. So like, then it comes back around to like, well, what are you doing to make sure you know what you need to know to be able to reproduce that product over and over again?
Right.
And that's why, like, to me, the system's more important than the single workflow that you do, you know?
Which is really interesting. I think you're totally right, but it makes sense why people don't approach it that way, because with that other mindset of like, here it is and ship it and it's another thing. So I think it's interesting to make it like part of the culture.
Yeah, I agree.
And then it's not such a big deal when it comes around. You're like, okay, we know, right? We've learned, here's where we want to tweak this. Here's where, the messaging needs to go. And it's not so, like, wow, we got to launch into this initiative and figure it all out and everything.
Totally. Well, one thing we struggle with here, that part of the reason I have to do that, is our target audience is sales. Like, we sell to sellers. So, it's not like we sell to an audience that product marketing can know more about than sales.
Right.
Sales will always say, well, you don't understand. Like, we're in the trenches. We're the persona. You don't get it, if they disagree with us. And the only way to counteract that is for me to literally say, my team joined 50x more calls than your sales leadership team did. We actually know more about deals than you do. That's the only way to do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you've got that challenge. You're in like, the sales driven organization. So it's how do you kind of hold your grounds in marketing and show that what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, Jordan.
You too. See you.